Welcome to the Builders Podcast, episode 157, Carrington Crothers, Mastering the Art of Photography Beyond Stock Images. Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share, if we've earned it. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable From the Trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another The Builders. Today, we are joined by Carrington Crothers. Welcome to the show, Carrington.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
Now, Carrington, you're the founder of Prospect Street Studio, right?
That is me.
Owner?
I am.
Owner, founder,
Yep.
Whatever you want to call yourself.
Same old.
She is a photographer. Has a lot of experience with that and some videography and things like that. We actually met through a project, something we were going to try to do together. We ended up not working together, but we ended up saying, well, you can be on my podcast. And here you are. We've never had a photographer on our podcast. And so that's an interesting topic in and of itself. But of course, on the Builders, what we like to do when we have you on, especially for the first time, is we like to learn a little bit about you, what your origin story is, from an entrepreneurial perspective, how you ended up where you are, being the awesome person you are, helping people, doing the amazing things you're doing in the world. How you got there, what inspired you, what's that journey look like? And so with that, you can tell us the short version, long version, whatever you think is most inspiring and interesting. But I'll hand it to you if you want to pick it up from there.
Yeah, definitely. So I am definitely not the entrepreneur who was like, oh, when I was 5 years old, I knew I would fall into this. That was not me. I was the person who was a hot mess, had no idea what they were going to do. The only thing I understood was art and being creative. I'm like, that makes sense to me. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. So when I went to college, I was the person who changed their major 6 times around. Not joking. Wow. I was very lost. And I finally ended up majoring in graphic design with 3 or 4 minors because I took that many courses trying to figure it out.
Oh my goodness.
But when I was going through my graphic design course, we had to take photography, and I dreaded it. I was like, I don't get it. This makes no sense to me. And I ended up having to stay after class once with one of my graphic design professors. And while we were troubleshooting an issue, he just happened to ask me, like, how do you like photography? And I was very blunt, and I just said, Josh, I am lucky if I pass. That's all I care about at this point. So what I didn't realize is he loved photography. And he ended up taking me out to downtown Manchester, New Hampshire, and just taught me the basics of how a camera works. That same day, I looked into photography schools.
Wow.
I went to school for 2 more years, learned professional photography. I started freelancing. I tried the full-time route. I lasted 8 months and I quit. And went back to freelancing, assisting, learning the ins and outs of the industry, and slowly just building myself up until I was ready to say, like, all right, I'm ready to do this on my own, have my own business, and start growing it. But it's interesting to look back because people always say, you really don't know how you're going to affect someone's life. Like, you could say hi to someone at a coffee shop, and that could be the highlight of their day. Or tell them they have a nice haircut, or something, right? I don't think Josh realized 1 hour of his time teaching me how the shutter speed on my camera worked was literally going to change the entire trajectory of my future. And I 100% believe that if he didn't do that, I wouldn't be doing this today. So that's how I ended up here, was kind of out of luck and one person's generosity.
That's amazing. Yeah, it is incredible. Like, you don't realize the impact you have on other people. And you might do the same for somebody else and inspire them to, maybe on this podcast.
Yeah, you never know.
but that's incredible. Yeah, I mean, you knew you were creative. You were doing creative things, but the fact that you didn't like it at all at first, and you just had to learn a little
Yeah.
bit and have somebody, set you on that course is incredible. So you went to school for it. So you did it
Yep.
you did it the right way.
Well, I'm a hands-on person. I was like, I have cameras, but that's gonna take me so long to figure it out. So I ended up at New England School of Photography, which no longer exists anymore, unfortunately. But they teach you in like your first year everything about how your camera works, your basics of lighting and portraiture, and all the different avenues of photography. And then your second year, you can choose your major. And then they hone you in on all those skills. So I chose advertising and portraiture. So I was being taught, how do you do your lighting? How does this equipment work? How does it affect the person and the product, and adding it all together. So it was very hands-on and learning from industry professionals. So it wasn't just a regular professor who has been at a university for 40 years.
Yeah.
They bring people in who are actually working.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a different experience when you're learning from somebody who's out there doing it for a living versus someone who's teaching you it in theory.
Right. It's interesting. I think so. I kind of took the opposite route when I was no, we're going back a few years, 30 some years ago. Matt decided to be an artist, and I was technically an artist for a few years, and art tended to pay the bills. But I had gone to school out of high school, or gone to college out of high school for like a semester. And I took a business class, and then I took an art class. And I knew I liked art. And it was in Eau Claire, Wisconsin here. And they had a good art program, and I took that one class. And then I decided, you know what, I don't need school. I'm just going to be self-taught. And because I wanted to do more abstract art. I was more like, I wanted to be like the Picasso, or I was stretching my own canvas. I was doing, and I did. I learned all this stuff, but I had to learn it myself, and I had to fumble my way through it. And in hindsight, I wish I would have taken, there's a lot of successful people that take that route and do fine. But for me, it's like, you could have taken the art classes and then did whatever you wanted afterwards. You could have still done all this other stuff, or maybe you would have done graphic arts or something related, instead of just dumping it eventually completely. But so that's interesting that that's good that you got good schooling and stuff. The other thing that is interesting too is, so when I actually ended up eventually wanting to follow business. And so I took those classes where I was in business, I think maybe economics too or something, and then that art class. Well, later on, I just took business, and I actually went to a technical college, and and then I was about to go back to university, and ended up getting a job instead. But the thing I loved about that college was that it wasn't, a UW college. But it was people that were hands-on. I was learning from people that were actually running their own businesses and stuff. And I thought that was super valuable.
Yep.
So you were doing, so you did all that. Right out of college, you tried to do freelancing right away, or you worked for somebody, or?
No, I jumped into freelancing.
Yeah.
And then there was a lot of influence in my life on get a job.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, get a job. And then I got the job, and I'm like, wow, I really don't enjoy this.
You didn't?
I was a lot happier doing the grind and figuring it out. So I finally hit my wit's end after literally 8 months. I didn't even last a year.
Well, what was it about you didn't like following somebody else's business plan?
Anything. I didn't like going to the same place every day, having to talk to the same people, reiterate those same conversations, shooting the exact same thing over and over again. I was like, this is not creative. This is repetitive. Everything about my day was just recycling the same thing. And I'm like, this is not fun.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, I would much rather at that moment make less money, be more happy, and figure it out along the way.
I hear you. Yeah. It's
And
gonna be
I
harder doing it the other way, but
Right.
yeah.
'Cause I left my full-time job not being established at all as any form of a photographer.
Yeah.
So it was a bigger risk when I left. But I was like, there's no reason for me to go through every day being miserable
Is there anything
if I
you
have another alternative.
is there anything you learned from having a job for a little while though? Like there's certain scenarios where I wish I would have like worked for somebody else so I could just even learn the processes or how this business operates. Did you pull anything from that job?
I definitely did. I learned a
Yeah.
lot of things I didn't like and
Mm.
that I don't want to do.
That's important
Um,
too. Yeah.
it is. That was probably one of the biggest things I learned
Mm.
is things that really just didn't flow with me.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you when you started freelancing again? How did you seek business? Was it a local thing or did you go online and to some freelance site and get work?
Mix of both. So I did a little bit of stuff trying to like find jobs through Upwork and then connecting with other local photographers, so assisting and
Mm.
doing that grunt work. And that's really where I learned a lot because when you're assisting other photographers, you're learning their processes and how they
Right.
communicate with clients and the way they're doing their lighting. So I can be assisting and be like, all right, I really love how this person is doing this style lighting or why they put this modifier on, right? And then there's other times where I'm like, oh, that was an interesting interaction,
Yeah.
right? So you expand your horizons on how you're learning through other people. So that's where I got the bulk of it. And then I would build off of just assisting because I'm not actually shooting when you're assisting
Mm.
to getting those small jobs, the little one-off shoots here and there, just to build your portfolio up.
Right.
And the more you're building a portfolio, one, I'm also strengthening all of my photography skills, the lighting, the do's and the don'ts, and just going along with it from there.
And again, what really stands out is that you're observing others and learning
Mm-hmm.
as much as you can from others. And I got a myriad of examples of that in my long storied all the businesses I've been in and tried and failed and all that good stuff. But one of the things, just kind of a recent example is even from an agency perspective, having a web design agency and working with other agencies. It's fascinating because I could have like if I would have just done direct clients, and just I would have had to figure it out on my own. But there's so many things I
Mm-hmm.
learn working, especially the larger agencies. Like, oh, that's how they do that. I can use that. I might
Right.
steal that, that idea
Uh-huh.
how to interact or whatever, how their processes are. And I think that's pretty much what you did. I think it's easy to, especially if you want to work for yourself, you don't want to work for others, but at the same time, you can learn so much from others. And like you said, not necessarily what to do, but sometimes what not to do. And
Right.
yeah,
Like,
there's,
and you grow the relationships with people.
yeah,
So there's a handful of people and photographers out there that I used to assist. And as they gained more trust with me, they would be like, Carrington, come behind the camera. Like, this is what I'm trying to do. What would you do next? So then it became more of a teaching opportunity because even though their client is standing right there, they're trusting me to be behind the camera, which would stress me out because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not my client. I don't know what's going on.
yeah,
But they made it educational because I was with them for so long,
yeah,
right? So then that helps building on that confidence, right? And it was interesting because I had somebody assisting for me on a shoot literally last week, and they're a student, they're in their final year, and I was making a change to the photo. So I made the change, and I showed them the before and after, and I had asked them, like, do you know how I did that? And they couldn't tell me. And I'm like, you're in your last year at a basic university in photography. I'm like, it was very interesting to see like that I educated them on a really simple camera setting. I'm like, all right, we got to get you more hands-on experience, not theoretical, right? So it was an interesting education moment for me to bring someone in who's at that point and seeing, all right, what do you actually know? What can you actually physically do, right? So seeing that transition for somebody else is also very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, like learn by doing. I mean, everyone knows that's
Mm-hmm.
the best way to learn. At
Yep.
this, most people. Yeah, it's the same way, even with programming and stuff. Like you can learn a lot from taking courses, and
Yep.
you can kind of learn the foundations. But until you're actually in the field doing your thing and learning from somebody that's like you, and that's awesome that you encourage that kind of learning environment where you're actually helping somebody think something through instead of just showing them what you're doing.
Yep.
That's hopefully how all of us in business can be with our teams or whatever, is to always be encouraging and testing. And I was just in Slack yesterday. There was something that I had to troubleshoot myself and figure out, and I posted it in Slack and said, hey, just for my team, I said, there's nothing actionable here. I just want to show you what I did here. So if you run into that, it was a comma was causing an issue, as it sometimes does in programming. I had
Mm-hmm.
a comma that was causing a problem. But it's important
Little thing.
to give back like that and help others. And the other thing too here, what I'm hearing is you're not only doing these projects, you're assisting, you're doing all this, you're building relationships. And
Yep.
really at the end of the day, especially if you have an agency or you're doing what you're doing, is relationships are everything, right?
Yep.
So do you consciously focus on networking? Like now that you've kind of established yourself. Well, first let's get to the agency. So you were freelancing.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, do you consider yourself an agency now, right? You got, or do you
Sort
still a
of.
freelancer?
I'm not a freelancer. No. I wouldn't
Okay.
consider myself one. I am just still my own individual person, but the goal is to be more than myself.
Okay. To be more than yourself. I know some people are like, I'm not really a freelancer. It's all how you define yourself. You can define yourself
Yeah.
however you want.
Yep.
But you're bigger than just a freelancer doing stuff on Upwork or
Yep.
something.
Yep.
So now you're there, and but relationships is so. What's your biggest focus in terms of marketing yourself, and is it all about networking and building those relationships and organically letting it grow, or do you do things like, are you involved in social media, doing things there, or advertising, or any of that stuff, or how do you
My
promote yourself?
my biggest is networking and building relationships for sure. I put a huge emphasis on that, and a big thing is just showing up.
Mm,
Like you can show up to one networking event, have some great conversations, but if you don't show up to the next one, there's going to be someone else having that conversation.
right.
So, having that consistency and always showing up and putting your face there, that's half of it. But also walking into it and not saying this has to be all about business. And that's one thing that a lot of people have learned about me. And after an event one day, this woman came up to me and she's like, all right, what did you learn about people? And I was like, well, he's getting married in the end of the month. I'm like, he's going to this antique show that I wanted to go. So I got a lot of information about that. And I was listening and they just were like, how did you get all this out of people? And I'm like, I just talked to them. Like, I don't know. I enjoy the conversation and learning more than just, oh, you're doing this for business. Right? So being able to follow up on that and saying like, hey, how was that antique event? Did you buy anything? Did you find what you're looking for? I would prefer that and then building on the business, right? Because I'm like, one, I'm actually curious about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then seeing where that goes.
Yeah, I mean, it's So you're doing actual network. Do you do like regular networking events and stuff? Is that something
Yep.
that you show up and
Yeah, so I
thing
attend them and I host them.
and host them? Wow.
Yep.
How did you end
Yeah, I
up?
saw a gap in my own industry. So going to a lot of events, you talk to a lot of real estate agents, insurance brokers, the typical, right?
Hmm.
Which, and there's nothing wrong with talking with them at all. But I was also noticing, I'm like, the conversations you have with other creatives often flow a bit differently. We understand each other at a different level without as much explanation. So I decided to chat with a local web designer that I knew and pitch an idea to her. Let's host an event just for creative professionals and see what happens. And it's been probably over about a year and a half now, maybe more. And that event turned into hosting an entire group. We
Wow.
have 150 members right now, and it's all just photographers, web designers, videographers, copywriters, all those people who we all piggyback off each other at some point.
Hmm.
As you would know, like a web designer might need a copywriter. You need to have the photos. You need all these other things. So it's like we're great referral partners. On top of that, we can have unique conversations that you can't go and have with the insurance broker, right? So it became a unique group that we just started growing.
That's fantastic. Congratulations. It's cool to bring people together like that and do something impactful. Um, so yeah, I mean, so that's and it's the same thing. Like you're creating this, you're creating relationships there. You got now referral
Mm-hmm.
partners now, and you don't lead with it. Like one of the things that, and I've talked with other people that own companies and stuff, and how even people that built their whole company on just networking, where like it's never about just. I think a lot of people go to these networking events and stuff, and they got this thing they're worried about is giving somebody a card and
Yep.
pitching them right away, and what can this guy do for me today? And it's not about that. It's about getting to know people, just having
Yep.
conversations, and then
Yep.
organically, because the first thing you want to do, right, is you want to have you want to get along with somebody, have something in common, connect
Mm-hmm.
with them somehow on a human level, and then maybe something comes out
Yep.
of that. But there's no pressure, right?
Exactly. And it's funny looking back on it. I remember going to my first ever networking event. I saw it posted. I'm like, it is literally a minute away from my studio. I
Mm-hmm.
have no excuse. I gotta go. I was so stressed. I was sitting in my car. I was like, I don't know anyone. I don't know what to expect. And so I finally went in and I ended up in conversations with people. And I was just like, card, collect, give a card, collect a card, give a card, collect a card. And now, when I go to an event, I'm lucky if I hand out 3 cards. Because I'm talking to way less people,
Yeah.
but I'm also more aware of who I want to be connecting with after the event. And
Right.
having those conversations, it's very different than looking back at what I did at my first one because I had no idea what was going on. I'm just here,
Mm-hmm.
right? I just showed up.
Yeah.
And it's very different now to show up and see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's plop. Going to a networking event or any kind of event, and just sitting down and letting the conversations flow, and just. I
Yep.
mean, some people it's probably harder if you're more of an introvert. You don't want to talk to people,
Mhm.
but you just have conversations. Just maybe someone starts a conversation with you. Yeah, and I think. Yeah, networking is super important for me too, and I find, especially having the podcast too, it's even a nice little way to get to know somebody as well because we have conversations
Mhm.
off the podcast, and but it's all also just organic. We're not here to
Right.
don't have any agendas really. Like I just
Right.
want to have a nice conversation with Carrington. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you and I, we obviously connected through that potential job together. And then I emailed you out. I'm like, I think we should continue this.
Yeah.
Like, even though we're not really able to collaborate on this job, I still want to build that relationship.
Well,
And here we are, what, like 8 months later?
yeah. Yeah, that's a huge lesson, right? I mean, and I think that's going to happen a lot. Where, and I've had this, you know, situations where I've needed something for a client or whatever, like in our case, photography, obviously. But it didn't work out. But that's okay. Now we have a relationship that we can build on. And maybe this didn't work, but 6 months from now, even 6 years from now, we do something incredible together, you know?
Right.
And now we have this kind of, we've become you've become part of the network, and I hopefully become part of your network. And we know somebody called AJ. You know AJ?
Yep.
AJ's been on this podcast a few times. He's a big proponent of.
Me to it.
Yeah. Yeah. He's, but you know, his big thing is networking as well. And he always talks about Albert, who's been on this podcast. You know, he had learned something from Albert about podcasting, or not podcasting, networking. And, but it's super important. And I think, like I said, you know, what you do today and what you might do tomorrow is who cares? So eventually you'll do something, or you just become friends and talk business periodically.
Exactly. Like I've definitely had those as well. And there's people who I met through business, and we had the conversation, and I'm like, honestly, I value more as a friend than as business. So like business comes up or referrals or whatever, that's great. But it was no longer my priority with that person because like we just built a friendship out of it.
Yeah.
So you really never know what that trajectory is going to take you.
Yeah, and it's about supporting each other, you know, and what you're doing, and whether that's on some social media, you know, site or something, just liking each other's stuff. AJ's always all over our stuff. He always tells us we're top of mind because we're always liking his stuff too. And,
he's great like that.
Yeah.
I very rarely post. I need to be better about it, but every time I do, I think he's always my first or second.
He is. I don't know.
And I'm like, you're the best.
I think he's got some kind of bot or something that notifies him. Matt and Carrington posted. Oh,
yep. Like, you got to get on it right now.
Oh, he's awesome. No, but that's important. And so we, you know, you don't think that has an impact, but it does. People notice that, you know? It was kind of talk about our situation a little bit. Like, so maybe this is educational. So you know, we had ended up, I think it was AJ that introduced us, right? And so this is a really, really great real world example. And that's what we love on the builders, talking about things from the trenches. So, you know, AJ and I had built this relationship for over the last, I don't even know, couple of years. He had been on my podcast a few times, and we talked periodically. We talked right before Christmas just to talk. He wanted to, you know, before the new year. And in fact, 2 days from now, he's going to be coming back for his fourth time.
All right.
But I had shot him a message, and this is as simple as it is, right? I have a client, long-term client, been doing work for them for like 2.5 years. We got a monthly contract with them and whatever, and they have a new project and a new website, a new product, whole thing. And now, as a web designer and developer, I have my wheelhouse. You know, I have purposely kept it contained, what we do. You know, there's certain things we don't do, and we just want to specialize in what we do. So relationships are really important, and being able to build partners that, you know, we can partner on things, or we can refer. And I didn't really, for some strange reason, I have not done, even though we do web design development daily, hourly, we haven't had that much of a call based on the clients we get for photographers or videographers or whatever. And some agencies that we partner with probably handle it themselves. And so I didn't really know anybody. So I reached out to AJ to see if he knew anybody. And of course he did. And you were one of them that he referred. He gave me your name, and I think we hopped on a call and we discussed the project, and we ended up actually hopping on a call with the client. And this, for whatever reason, they ended up going with another agency. And this is a great example where there was this kind of networking thing that happened, and we look beyond, you look beyond that event. You were like, I think you did shoot me an email. You're like, man, I know this didn't work out or whatever, but I'd love to continue this relationship. You know, maybe we do something different in the future or whatever. Or let's stay in touch. And that's not uncommon. And I love that. So what are your thoughts about that whole scenario? Do you have anything else you can pull out of that? That's informative?
A lot of it was like insane timing because you had talked to AJ about your needs for a photographer before he met me, like just before he met me. And then we got on a call, we're chatting, doing the whole normal thing. I'm explaining what I do. And he was like, I think I have a job for you. I need to connect you with Matt. I'm like, all right, like I'll talk to him. And literally that same day, he sent out an intro email to you and I because he knew that you needed someone.
Yeah.
And I was like, you really just never know, one, who knows who, and what needs have arisen, right? So I think that's also super powerful because I think AJ and I met on a Slack channel or something really random and got on a call, which then led to you and I. So sometimes you just never know where that path is going to take you.
It's beautiful. It's actually when you're in it, it's probably hard to imagine somebody that's not like, maybe they're just starting out in business, they don't, or networking or whatever, but it becomes this beautiful thing when you actually see it play out. It's just like, you know, in social media, when you get some business, you see, they saw that post, they maybe sent you a message or they went to your website and you see that thread and it's like, this stuff works. Wait a minute.
Yeah. I had someone reach out to me for photography, got on a call with them. I got the job and I asked them, I'm like, how did you find me? And they're like, oh, you were referred to us. I'm like, oh, I would be great to know. I can thank them. Like, who was it? And they're like, I don't know. Let me try and find out. So then they asked somebody else on their team, like, oh, this person referred this person. I was like a 5th tier connection.
Wow.
They could not figure out the first person that gave them my name. I still have no idea how I got connected to that company, but I was referred through like a string of people.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, they finally said, they're like, we really would appreciate it. They want to thank the person and keep that loop, but we have no idea how we got you.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, all right, I'll accept it. But it's just funny because you just don't know when things are going to arise.
You don't. And that you just got to do put yourself out there. You got to build a good reputation. All that brand is really important. All that stuff, obviously, as well. So you'll be doing good things in the world.
Right.
But you build that reputation and you just never know. So I mentioned Albert before, AJ's, like his favorite podcast that we've had, Al Wagner. I think it's Albert on ours. I don't know if he goes by Al. But he talked about how networking, and it was a very specific part of that podcast where he was like, where he communicated how he thinks of networking. It's not just you, like us two talking and we're going to exchange business cards and just what can I get from you? He's like, what you're actually doing is you're getting access to this.
Right.
You're getting access to that person's address book, and not necessarily today. Somewhere down the road, somebody is going to, like in AJ's situation, or like where somebody's going to need something. You're going to be like, wait, top of mind. Oh, Matt does that. Hey, I know this guy or this wonderful lady over there that does photography. I'll refer you. I'll connect you, and that is, how it works. And sometimes, you don't know. It's like you try to, it's good. That's actually a great lesson to ask, like where somebody heard about you.
Right. I also just think, one, it's good to thank the person, but also it's interesting to see where did you even meet that person? Right. But also just keeping that open mind. I got one of my best connections for business through a real estate agent this year. They sold the house for the marketing director at a pretty large company, and she happened to mention needing photography. And she was like, I need food photography. Do you know anyone? And he was like, I can ask. He's like, I know 2 photographers. I don't know if they do food. So he reached out. One said no. I said yes, and he made the connection. But when it also comes to stuff like photography or a lot of different mediums, there's so many avenues you could take. When you look at photography, you can make so many lines off of that to be like portraiture, landscapes, product, food, weddings, maternity. There's like, the list is very broad.
Yeah.
So when someone says, I need a photographer, it's always asking those more questions, because where I am, specializing in product and food in the CPG space, that's hyper different than somebody who's shooting a wedding.
Mm.
Like, we are not the same person.
Right.
You know? So it's putting yourself out there and making people understand who you are in your own space.
Sure. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, because you're right. It's probably a very different skill set, very different approach to everything. So
I always tell people, I'm like, you don't want me to shoot your wedding. You don't want me doing any of that. Like, keep me away from it.
So that's
like, I know my strengths.
Yeah, well, that's important. Like I said, you know your wheelhouse, right? Like what you do, and that's what you should get. That's what you should lead with in your marketing and conversations and everything. This is specifically what we do, so people know. Like I know AJ. We'll talk about AJ a lot today. His ears are going to be ringing. E-commerce, that's his thing, right?
Yep.
And that he's established this past year, and so I know, like, if there was somebody that needed some help with marketing and the e-commerce side of things or whatever, he's the guy.
Exactly.
But
that's why him and I mesh so well.
Yeah. So okay. So you just mentioned kind of what you do. So you're focused more on products and that type of stuff. What is it? What kind of work? What's your like ideal clients and stuff? Who do you work with?
So I always say that, like, for me, there's two sides of it. My local base, I'm more on location, shooting with people, helping with website revamps, manufacturing companies, showing the machinery. A lot of that is my local base. So then I can also go national, and that is where the product comes in. And that's a big thing for me. It's the CPG space. You walk down any grocery store and you see that snack aisle, that's where I am, right? That food and beverage space, and creating those images for the e-commerce, the marketing, Amazon, your Shopify site, and really honing in on what are the images that are actually going to up-level that brand, increase your sales, your conversions, reduce your return rate. And instead of saying, here's 15 images, good luck, let me know when you need more, I want to say, here's 15 images that are going to actually make this difference, right? So I end up being very strategic about it. I do that for local businesses as well. It's all about figuring out, if we have people on it, where's the placement? How is it going to work? So building imagery that's actually going to grow a business versus then being just being a placeholder or a pretty visual.
Yeah. Yeah, because when you think as photographer, somebody's going to photograph a product, you think maybe you might imagine them putting the product in some like box or something, or with a background, and then from different angles. Maybe the lighting matters, but you're not thinking about it just from the technical perspective, or the lighting, and maybe well, you're going to think all that as well. But you're thinking strategically, like, how is this going to actually translate to somebody getting more sales or more attention or whatever? So that's an interesting aspect of what you're doing. You're doing far more than just taking photographs.
Right. Yeah, I had someone come to me and we did a review of all the current imagery. And I'm like, what you're missing is a lot of education that the viewer can be getting out of these images. So she basically had, those like over the door, like basket shelf things that stack?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm explaining that well. But hers is just a straight on picture. And I'm like, if you shoot this at an angle and a little bit higher, you can see the depth, you can see the pockets, you can see the texture on the front, you can now see the way the hooks have this extra little like piece so it gets tighter. I'm like, if we switch the angle of your photo, I'm like, you just increase the education for the viewer with 10, or not 10, 5 new points about this product that they now don't have to go and read. They're just going to see it and get it, which your current photo doesn't have. So now if they want to know it, they have to go to your description and read it. So I was like, take all that information and educate people as much as you can in the photo and make it hyper simple for them to make that decision.
Yeah. That's interesting because you're actually communicating something with photos. You're not just It's not just a photo of what it looks like. You're trying to teach something about what that product is and what it does. And highlighting maybe unique features of that product or whatever.
Yep.
Interesting. What other things do you look at in a photograph? Besides, I think one of the things that I remember one of our first conversations, we were talking about photography and in that particular situation we were in. And I remember you saying something about SEO or something. Like photography can have an impact on actual search as well. And how...
Yeah. So obviously, like, your image and name is a huge part. So if you input your image as image 1732.8, that doesn't tell Google anything. So first is you can change the image name, and I can say what the product is, where the product is from, and Google can read that. And then on the website, on the back end, you can add your alt tags to those images to also enhance it that way. And then on the flip side of it, you have the difference between stock imagery and actual photography. So Google is getting better at reading what a stock image is versus a actual photograph that somebody took. And if you have that stock photography and Google realizes it, they're going to penalize you for it. Whereas if you just make that personalized and unique photo, you're not going to have that same penalty, right? So there is a higher benefit the more Google learns to fixing that problem now. So if you have that stock photography, talk to someone like me. Figure out, like, what do we have to do to have that removed and replace it before it actually hurts you.
Interesting.
So those are just 3 different things about it. But your photos end up everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So optimizing them the best way you can is definitely important.
Yeah, and it may not even be like penalties so much as you're just not going to get any benefit from it, right? I mean, it's because it's interesting when you're saying like you get a stock image. I mean, all you have to do is go to Google photo search. You can drag a photo in there, and it'll actually find all the photos that look like it, and so instantly, Google knows instantly that this is just a stock image. So don't pay too much attention to it. It's not going to be, it's going to say something about that site. Compared to other sites, and it's not easy for every website or company or whatever to get those photos done that are personalized or whatever. I mean, I think that's something where I see the challenge from my perspective as a web developer. Like, I would love everybody. I try to encourage people to get photos, or share photos of their team or themselves or their, and even for my sites, like I have stock photos because I'm, not in a position to create that photo myself. Sometimes maybe it'll be budget for somebody. Sometimes it's just, we don't have anything nice to take a picture of. This is going to look way better. How do you kind of weigh those two things though? Is it something you really, try to encourage people to, push them to getting more unique photos done or actual photos? Obviously you're in the business, but I mean, how hard is it to nudge somebody in that direction? Or is it a budget thing always, or is it just something that they can't?
So there's a few different ways to kind of go about it. If somebody is adamant that they're like, we're using stock, my whole thing is be really aware of how many downloads that image has. Pick an image with the least amount of downloads because it's going to be used on less places on the internet. So it's going to probably take Google a little bit longer to find it. But if you take that first image you find on Shutterstock, it's probably going to be everywhere. So you're not helping yourself stand out, and you're not helping yourself with Google either.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the budget for photography, like anyone could come to me and I can help them create that imagery, right? But if they don't have it, and you say, hey, like, say you came to me and you're like, I have this website, this is what what does the client need? I can help walk them through and say, hey, this is your copy, this is the type of photo you need to be creating, whether it's with your cell phone or what you name it. I can help walk them through and say, these are the things you need to do to get the best image possible until you're at a point where we can replace that image.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, our phones are so powerful now. You could probably use,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not going to obviously be as professional as if you did it, but it's a good next step.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's someone I know and they do a lot of websites and social media, but they want to get better at creating the content themselves for their clients. So I did an entire lesson with them about composition, lighting, positioning, examples. I took real world examples that they've done and I physically just edited them so they could understand and see differences. I'm like, if you remove this or change that, this is the difference. So they could start to understand. And then we were ongoing with where they sent me photos as they took them.
Yeah.
And I would respond back and say, like, all right, that's great. Change your angle. Get a little bit lower. Zoom in more. Get closer. And as we were doing that hands-on or hand-holding, they don't send me anything anymore. They graduated, right?
Nice.
They
Yeah.
just get it.
Yeah.
Unless they're really struggling, they're like, this just looks like crap. How do I fix it? For the most part, they have hit a point where the imagery is a lot better than what it was, and they're more confident in what they're creating.
Yeah. So I'm looking at my phone here because I was trying to remember the name of it. So, and maybe you've heard of this. So I kind of I have a very bad hobby, very bad, and then I'm very bad at it. I want to kind of pick up photography, iPhone photography specifically, because I do I've been doing some hiking and stuff. I'm like, if I'm out and about, and I'm using that even on my social media and like I Instagram and stuff. I'm starting to weave that in. But I wanted to learn a little bit more about photography, myself. And I took it's called iPhone Photo Academy. I think Emil Parker, I'm not going to pronounce his last name right. Pakarklis. Pakarklis. And then there's iPhone Editing Academy. And I just took that course and I learned so much from it. And what's fascinating to me, though, is having an art background and having a web design background. So many of the concepts, the composition, all that stuff translates like, oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it makes so much sense, right?
So
I talk to you all the time. I'm like, slow down, pretend like you're Picasso, right?
Yeah.
It's all the same.
Yeah. And so it is learnable. And that's I was thinking about that. Like, do you think ultimately there's anything wrong with stock images? Like if you see, because everyone grab it, obviously they're popular because there's sites that, their whole business model is that.
Right.
But is that the progression is, okay, use stock images, maybe to get something out today. Maybe if it's a time thing, right? We don't have time. We got to get something up.
Yep.
The next step is, if you can, do kind of your own photography, if you can do that. And then the next thing is to come to somebody like yourself and talk about photography. What does that process look like when somebody comes to you? They you kind of have some meetings, some discovery calls with them, see what their needs are, and then kind of guide them through that process.
Yeah, so a lot of it when somebody comes to me is really figuring, like, what have you been doing now? Where are you trying to go? And how can we make photography help bridge that gap, right? So like I was saying, if somebody is struggling with returns, I'm going to take a look at it because imagery is that first thing people see.
Right.
Can we fix that? Is there a problem there? What do we have to do to make those changes? So I'll walk through with people and we'll do a whole strategy session and it'll be live and I'll give them that candid review. This is how the imagery is flowing with the hierarchy of your website. This is how it's translating on Amazon. This is where you're at for social media. And maybe when you look at all three, maybe they're not all branded right. Or maybe one isn't actually helping. So how are those different elements aligning with your brand as a whole? And what do you need to do to make them align? So I look at it as that overall picture, and then saying, let's create those specific images that will actually make that impact. So I never want to be the person who's like, oh, here's 30 images and good luck. Let me know when you need more.
No.
I'm going to say, all right, you need a hero image on your website. You need this image here. What's the copy that's going next to it? How do we make it so that the person viewing sees it, knows where to look next, and continue scrolling, right? Because your messaging and your photos are a huge part of why someone's on a website. So use that all to your advantage.
Right. And I like that you kind of start with the problem too, or if there is a problem, like how can we solve that? Do you work with the copywriter a lot, or them on the copy if they don't have a copywriter? Because there's kind of marriage there, right, between the imagery and the copy, right?
Oh yeah. I always say to people, and you'll probably hear me say it again at some point, you can't go to a website and have copy that says "let's party" and then a dark and moody photo next to it.
Right.
Because they're not saying the same thing.
Yeah, it's an extreme example, but yes.
It is. But it gets the point across where if you have messaging,
right,
the photo's got to say the same thing, because the photo is basically like activating both sides of your brain. If you say the word dog, you and I are going to have a very different picture in our head of a dog. If you show a photo of a dog, now we both know it's a dog. We know what type of dog, size of dog. Is it in a city, a residential home, with a family? Like, so much more information. So you're activating more information. So making sure it's aligned is really important. You can't have a picture of a dog and then be like, cat adoption. People are going to be like, why is there a dog there? You know?
Yeah, and it has to be contextual to the surrounding, because we work with copywriters too, and we do work, oftentimes it could be graphics or whatever, but it has to, number one, match the copy. We even do this with icons. You know, it's got to match that copy. That icon needs to communicate what that is about and be obvious, and maybe, draw attention to it. But also it could be just somebody pointing in the right direction towards a copy.
Yep.
And all that stuff has to be thought about. Well, Carrington, we could talk about this all day. But we probably don't have all day. We're not a 3-hour podcast yet. Someday, maybe we'll.
One of these days, we'll get there.
But it's great getting to know you a little bit better, your background and what you do, and learning some tips from you, which is, photography is so fascinating. And it has such a profound impact on a website, especially and product sites and all that as well. But I always tell people from a web design perspective, I'm like, go to a website, now take away all the images. What are you left with? It's just, we used to design and build lots of, WordPress themes to sell to the masses in a marketplace. It was the same thing. Like, we couldn't just build a theme. We had to choose the imagery for that theme to actually would make sense for a niche. And anyway, but no, it's great to get to know you. And so if somebody wants to learn more about what you do, or get in touch with you, or see where you hang out, where do you hang out on the web?
I'm a little bit slow when it comes to social media, but I am on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me just at prospectstreetstudio.com. There's a contact form, or info@prospectstreetstudio.com. If anyone has questions or is looking to up-level their photography, I'm always open to a conversation. I love helping people, educating them, and just answering questions as well. If people aren't sure where to go, feel free to ask. I'm an open book, but easiest way to contact me is either through my website or my email.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Until next time.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already, and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. If you want to comment on this episode's page, provide me with requests on topics for future episodes, or inquire about being a guest, please find your way to thebuilders.fm. You can contact me there or add a comment under these show notes. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you are interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.